Hi and welcome back to a new video, and also a special video which I saved for end of the year. We are talking about this CPU which I found on eBay a few months ago. It was listed there for 10,000 US dollar, which was on the first sight already something special. And then looking at the size and also the name, because it's a Hitachi mainframe CPU, it's even more special. But then I opened the offer and checked the description, and it said that this CPU was used in the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which you probably all know because of the disaster in 2011 that happened after a tsunami. So here we are with this CPU, and what we want to do today is check out the CPU, if this is actually plausible that this CPU was used in a nuclear power plant, and what do we actually have here. Hetzner is a leading hosting provider and data center operator in Europe, operating hundreds of thousands of servers. Hetzner has been able to develop its market both within and outside Europe by combining new technology, affordable pricing, professional support and flexible customer service. They run their own cutting-edge data centers in Nuremberg and Falkenstein, Germany, and in Helsinki, Finland. In addition to high-performance dedicated servers and their powerful Hetzner cloud at amazing price, they now provide their managed servers with improved hardware. If you use them, you can focus on your business and projects, and Hetzner takes care of the server administration. Click on the link in the description below for all information about Hetzner. After buying the CPU, the obvious thing to do was to contact the seller and ask if he can actually verify the information if the CPU was used in Fukushima or not. Unfortunately, he said that he cannot disclose any more information because of legal reasons, which could be true, could also be something that he has to hide something. But yeah, I mean, in a nuclear power plant, most of the information is disclosed, so you cannot publicly access this for security reasons. That makes absolute sense, which makes it even harder to verify or find any kind of information about it. Generally speaking, we have a 15 times 15 centimeter big CPU with a lot of pins on the back and some stainless steel cover on the front. And on the CPU, we see XSH31A, listed as HDM. That could be hardware device module or something like that, but it's just an assumption. If you have an idea what HDM means, please let me know. And that was the point where I started all of my research. To start somewhere, I looked at the building phase of the nuclear power plant, which started in 1967. That also means they started with the planning phase years ahead, maybe 2, 3, probably 5 years earlier. And that was more the analog phase of things and not so much a digital phase like we have today with modern semiconductor parts. And they completed the building phase with unit number 6 in 1979. The most obvious thing to start with is Googling anything that's written on the CPU. It's a Hitachi CPU, and I already told you the XSH31. All of that didn't lead to any kind of results. I even asked ChatGPT, maybe I missed something, but also ChatGPT didn't really know what to do with this information. Then I ended up on the homepage of TEPCO, which is the operator of Fukushima Daiichi, or was the operator, and they are now documenting the decommissioning phase of the nuclear power plant, which is also very interesting. So aside from this video, I can absolutely recommend that you just follow this documentation, because you can walk through some of the ruins of the power plant. And for example, you can also look into the control room of unit number 6. I then started going almost frame by frame through the footage of the control room, and then at some point I spotted the logo of General Electric on top of one of the control room images. I also verified this through Google image search to make sure that the logo is correct. And then going through General Electric, I figured out that General Electric was responsible for the control rooms of reactors or units 1, 2 and 6. Toshiba built units 3 and 5, and Hitachi built unit 4, or the control room for unit 4. Unit number 4 was also the only one that was not running while the disaster in 2011 happened. It was still damaged, at least partially. The building of unit number 4 was damaged by some hydrogen that was escaping from unit number 3 to 4, and then there was some explosion happening. And at least at that time you might ask yourself the question, is it maybe dangerous to have this thing here? Is there still some kind of radiation coming from this that could be dangerous for me? And obviously that was a question I also asked myself when buying the CPU. Then I bought, not sure how this is called in English, but you can measure the radiation. And I checked the parcel, and then after unpacking it, I checked the CPU itself, but there was nothing at all detected, so it's fine, it's fine. I'm not going to die through radiation from this is absolutely safe, but I was concerned, obviously, and I checked it, but it seems to be not dangerous. Following the eBay listing, the seller listed this as high-tech M200H mainframe server CPU. And then if you research about this, you can find that Hitachi first showed this in 1978, which is a little bit late, considering that they started running the nuclear power plant in 1978. So that is also already kind of weird, because you have to think about they started with a planning phase years upfront. Also, if we look at the high-tech 8250, which was launched in 1970, we see a huge technological difference, because you see those typical PCBs that are assembled with additional ICs that look kind of like the first Intel CPUs, because it's roughly the same era of microprocessing or semiconductor engineering. There is a huge difference to what we have on the table here. Just technologically speaking, it doesn't really fit into the early phase of the nuclear power plant. And also, for additional information, this would be an IBM ES9000 mainframe CPU, and this is from 1991. But that is a lot closer to our CPU. In 1992, Hitachi launched the Super H instruction. Instruction is something you know from today as maybe AVX or AVX512 SSE. Those are instructions CPUs can run. And this CPU is called XSH31. And considering that it's the same era probably where Super H was launched, kind of fits together. If we take a closer look at the serial number, it's listing 94YB10. The 94 could actually be the time when the CPU was built, so maybe 1994. At least this would fit perfectly to the Super H story. After additional research, I found the Hitachi MP880. It was launched in 1991, looks a little bit similar to our CPU, and it was performing with 500 MHz speed, which was pretty quick for that time. And the successor of the MP880 was the MP5800. And after looking at images of that CPU, kind of reminded me of what I have on the table right here. I then found documents of how the MP5800 and also the MP6000 was assembled and how it was built. And you can see that the MP6000 was always running with water cooling due to the high power consumption. But we also know that the MP880 from 1991 was already running with water cooling. So it's very likely, at least if the serial number is a good indicator for the year it was built, then it would make sense that this would be an MP5800, but with water cooling. The funny part is that there is a public price list by Hitachi from 1996. And this lists the MP5800 with 28.8 million yen per month as a price for the CPU, because it seems like you had to rent it. And if you calculate in yen, that is about 200,000 US dollar per month, just to have the CPU. And by today's standards, because of inflation and everything, this would be roughly 350,000 US dollar, which is insane, considering that it's just the CPU per month without anything else, like no server, nothing. It also lists the other components that you need, and I did a rough estimate. So if you just want to run the CPU, like a single CPU with the server, you end up with about 6 million US dollar per year, just the cost of running the server. And then usually you didn't only use one of these CPUs, but multiple. So you have to think about that whoever owned this back then was able to pay a double-digit amount of $1 million per year to run that server. But now let's take a closer look at the CPU. First of all, we have the label, which we already talked about, Hitachi made in Japan, with the HDM and the revision and also serial number that we already talked about. And you probably already seen the two connections for cooling. We have A and B, so that's for the water cooling connection. And if we press in here, and you can also see it in here, there is still water inside. So not sure what kind of coolant or anything is inside. That's something we will maybe be able to determine later once we open the CPU, because that would obviously be my goal, to remove the lid. It's basically delidding the biggest CPU ever, to find out what is inside, and maybe then we can see how many cores or whatever the CPU has. But if we turn it around, you can see I protected the CPU with a little bit of foam to also protect my hand. Underneath the foam we have all those pins. You can see some of them are unfortunately bent, but I mean, it's not like I have a motherboard on here where I can test it, right? I also counted, we have 100 times 100 pins, which means 10,000 pins in total. That is quite a lot more than what we have on any kind of normal desktop or server nowadays. Even on high-end AMD or Intel servers, you don't have this amount of insane pins. That is already something, quite something. The white base that you can see is probably some sort of ceramic, which was widely used in server CPUs or big mainframe CPUs back then in this time. It's also marked again with XSH31, the same as we can see in front. There's an additional marking here with H3XS, not sure what this stands for. Also couldn't find anything about this, so yeah, unfortunately not much to do with that kind of information. But we see, if we look from the side, that there is some kind of solder layer in between the ceramic and what appears to be a frame. That also aligns with the information I could find how those CPUs are built, which is probably going to be a nightmare opening this CPU. I have faith that the lid is only glued on, but probably only one way to find that out. The thing is, inspecting the CPU, I couldn't find any kind of screws. Basically, the only screws are the ones for the water cooling connection and the tiny one in the corner, which doesn't really make sense for opening the CPU. That might just be for, I don't know, getting out some air out of the water channel or something. Apart from that, nothing visible. So I'll just try to lift this up underneath here. Already difficult just getting in between, but it seems to sit tight. Oh. Okay. The thing that was probably acting like the glue here is the thermal paste. If you pay attention to how many chips we have and how much surface area, definitely has some kind of effect like a glue. About 1 hour and it feels like 1 kilogram of thermal paste later, I was able to clean the CPU, and it's still confusing because if you count the different tiles on this multi-chip module, it is quite difficult to estimate which chip is actually doing what. For example, we have 5 of these smaller ones, if I counted correctly, like 10 of the bigger ones, and then 7 of the like mid-sized ones, which makes it really difficult to estimate what kind of CPU we have and how it consists. Typically, those kind of CPUs, they are made of the core, which is like a single core chip, and then you have maybe memory, and maybe something like an I/O controller for memory or for like additional memory. That's how those multi-chip modules are usually made, but for this one, it is difficult to say how the CPU, is working. With these types of MCMs, it is possible that they also have some kind of redundancy. For example, that's something I learned with IBM Power CPUs. Some of them have partially unused chips. So for example, it could be an 8-core CPU with 8 chips, but they are 9 on the MCM. That could be that one extra chip is there for spare. If over the time one chip dies, then you have an extra one. That's what IBM Power is often doing. And I would say this is kind of the same category of a CPU, and probably with the same life expectancy and pricing they charge, it might make sense that some of these chips are just there for pure redundancy. At this point though, we still don't really know if this CPU was used in Fukushima or not. Going back to the eBay listing, it said M200H Skyline supercomputer, which for itself doesn't really make much sense because the M200H was not a Skyline supercomputer. The Skyline supercomputer was with the MP5800 around the year 2000, which then again would make sense looking at this CPU. Then you would ask yourself the question, is it plausible that it was used in Fukushima? And I would say yes. I also spotted that there is an engravement on the lid that says 2011, which again kind of fits the Fukushima disaster. And if you think about what the CPU itself actually is and how much it costs, it limits down the potential customer quite a bit. It's the same with those very expensive IBM Power CPUs. They cost millions. And you could, if you follow the article and description of the MP5800, you could connect up to 32 of those devices. If you think about, again, that it's $350,000 per piece per month, and you could link up to 32 pieces, that drastically limits down the potential customer of such a CPU. I would say the only customer could be government, military, medicine, banks maybe, and probably infrastructure such as energy providers, because for them, reliability is much more important than the money itself. And that's probably how it could make sense that the CPU was actually used in Fukushima. I also talked about this entire topic with my dad because he used to work in power plants. He had like 30 years of experience, like in multiple different power plants, also setting them up, which is probably, a case where you can get unique insights. And I asked him about how plausible is all of this. And then he said, at least for the critical part of the unit control of a reactor, you wouldn't typically change the system. Even after 20 or 30 years, you wouldn't typically just change the control system. Simply because you would have to shut down the power plant and get new certificates from the government and everything, because usually, the security and safety is number one priority in such a nuclear power plant, which is why they usually don't upgrade. Even if it's older technology, they usually don't upgrade this specific part. But he also pointed out that it's very likely that there are additional systems around it. Could be some, additional control unit, something just to observe some parameters of the systems. That is something that it's likely that they upgraded maybe after 20 or 25 years. So it sounds plausible that it was used there, especially considering the price. If you have any other insights, thoughts, let me know. Otherwise, I want to thank you for your support during this year once again. Thank you for watching all my videos, because just with your single view, you're contributing to this channel and allowing me to do things like this, and this way maybe also give something back to you, something interesting. So thanks again for your support, and I hope you have a very nice fresh start into 2024. Thanks and see you next time. Bye bye.